What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another podcast episode. Today is a special one as I sit down to talk with Dave, the owner of Infinity Sup and Surf, as we talk all things about his newest race board called the EVERREADY. We focus the majority of today's conversation on the design of the race board and why Dave chose the certain design aspects that he did to help this board perform better in all-around conditions. We also talk about what we both love about this new race board and how we have both enjoyed using it on the water. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. So what's up, Dave? Welcome to today's podcast. I'm super stoked to have you on here as we talk everything about your new EVERREADY race board. But before we dive into that, how are you doing today and what have you been up to so far this summer?
Yeah, what's up, Ethan? It's good to see you, man. Summer's been cool. It's been fun. A lot of good waves. Couple races in town, and yeah, just spending a lot of time on the new race boards, and like I said, trying to catch some waves and stay busy. And so far, so good. Yeah.
That's awesome. It sounds like it's been a fun time down there in California then. I know for myself personally, I've also have really been enjoying using your new EVERREADY race board up here in the Pacific Northwest. But before we dive into that, I do have another question for you around this phrase you guys use in your company called the Speed Freaks. And I would love to hear the story of kind of how this phrase came into being and why you guys use this phrase in your company.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, well, obviously, the Speed Freaks is kind of like our team mascot. It's more than anything a team mascot, just a fun way to call the team. A little bit of a mantra. Back in the day when Slater Trout was palling for us, we always were just coming up with some cool, just fun ideas, and we're just posting stuff, and this like early days of social media, but I remember like this one guy goes, "Damn, you guys are just a bunch of speed freaks," and I'm like, "Well, that's kind of cool," you know what I mean? So I kind of started hashtagging Infinity Speed Freaks just for fun because the guy called us some speed freaks because we're out there testing boards, we're doing like sprints, we're looking at the GPS, and you guys are just freaks, speed freaks. So I always thought that was pretty cool, and then just kind of made a little mascot, which is our tiger, and kind of taken from I don't know if you're familiar with the old Bones Brigade skate videos, but that's what they were called, the Bones Brigade. So it was basically like a skateboard team, and they were all like super good friends. They hung out all the time, and they're just diehard and core skateboarders, and they became known as like the Bones Brigade.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a little play on that, the Speed Freaks, and I just thought it's fun more than anything. I just want to have fun when I'm doing this whole paddle thing, and it just kind of adds to that, and it kind of caught on, and now I use it for different things and actually have it trademarked, and some of our Speed Freaks merch is like some of our best selling merch just because I think people identify with it, right? Just want to be a part of something, and it's super authentic, super fun, and we all want to go fast, whether it's surfing or racing. So it's really cool.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool. I kind of created that inner club with the Speed Freaks, as I know for a lot of people, they really enjoy being part of kind of like those inner groups. Do you still do any kind of skateboarding nowadays, or is that kind of more of a past experience?
Not anymore. I was skateboarding, maybe until I'm 48 now, so maybe until I was like 40, and the slams, they're a little different when you're 40. So I took my final slam, and I was over it. No more.
That's awesome. So moving into the topic now of this new EVERREADY race board. You guys are obviously not new to the race board scene. You have been designing and creating race boards for many years now. But with a new EVERREADY race board, it's kind of taken your line of race boards kind of in a new direction. So my first question to you is, what has kind of inspired and led to the creation of this new EVERREADY race board?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, the EverReady's been amazing. It's been so well received. It's really been fun, to just kind of see where they're popping up, whether it's over the country or over the world, and people sending me messages how much they love the board, and it's been really rewarding. But yeah, I mean, look, the Blackfish is kind of it's kind of legendary in itself. We've been making it for a long time, and generally when you have a really good design, you're kind of just tweaking it from here, from a certain point, right? Just kind of adjusting super things. So there's like 5 or 6 iterations of the Blackfish, which if you look at them closely, they all kind of have the same DNA. Really, like they pretty much all have the same rocker. But we started messing with the outline, how we're releasing the board with the bottom contours, the nose shape, just kind of doing different things for what the team wanted at a specific era of paddling. And it just gets to a point where, you can't call it a blackfish anymore if it's getting tweaked too far out of what it is, right? And so quickly we started realizing that because this board was like the first board I started off with a completely new rocker. It's a completely different rocker than the blackfish, and so it just right there, you can't call it a blackfish anymore. But we did start off with a blackfish shape, changing the rocker, and that was like the very first one I made. That we ended up racing in Hood River, Arthur Arukin, and I mean the board was great, right? But it didn't feel any different. It felt pretty much like a blackfish, So we're like, okay, this is cool, this is great, but I'm a little bored with it because we already have this board. So we started pushing the outline, getting the nose a little narrower. The blackfish is really, really like the outline's really linear, really parallel. And this board has a little more of a curve to it. And the wide point's not necessarily forward, but it stays wider, longer front of center, which is different than the blackfish already. The nose is more pointy, and I mean, really a lot of different stuff. I mean, you flip the board over, it's already a different board too. And so we just wanted to get a new feel, a completely new feel. We know what the blackfish does, we have that, but now let's start to progress and push it. And Arthur Arukin a lot of credit for pushing me out of my comfort zone. That was really cool. So yeah, it was just to get, what's next for all around boards. We've got this design nailed. What's our next spot? How can we improve on it? And, we did the work, and it really took it to the next level as far as what we wanted out of it.
That's awesome. So, what are some areas that you were trying to really improve in with this new race board in terms of all around conditions in comparison to the older Blackfish dugout?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to improve on a board that people love. People love the blackfish, and every time you like mess with it or tinker with it, someone's bummed.
Yep.
Like my favorite, So it's really hard. But the one thing that kept popping up was, we had the flat deck and the dugout version, and the blackfish traditionally is a flat deck board. That's kind of where it won the like kind of the hearts of everybody. It truly is a leader, I feel, in that space. So the dugout, we added it just from the trends of paddling, what's going on, for a little bit heavier waters. And truthfully, we didn't go all in on a dugout. It's a dugout, but it's not really dug out. And more and more we started paddling that board, and I spent a lot of time on our downtown board, which is our downwind board last year. The more and more I would switch back from both boards, you're just like, wow, like the dugout in the downtown is really serving me well in certain conditions, and that the blackfish isn't. So it was more of like, okay, we got to commit to the dugout. Let's get aggressive with it, and go all in on the dugout. So now it's very specific. You have your flat water board and your dugout board. So that was the main thing. And then, when it comes to an all around board, obviously everybody wants it to be fast in flat water, but then it's got to be stable in the bumpy stuff. It's got to, does it downwind and, all that. So, I mean, it's not like we approach it differently in the way of what we wanted to do from a blackfish, but how can we get there? So it was very clear, we leave the blackfish over here, let's push it over here. So one of the main things was efficiency upwind. Like I keep going back to the downtown, but just with that bigger, higher volume, forward center nose and deeper dugout, it keeps that momentum forward and specifically in upwind like quite well. So that was something we took into account. Also narrowing the nose just kind of makes it fit in the bumps and kind of pierce through the waves a little bit better. And then just trying to get a really, really good glide out of it as always. But yeah, just mainly efficiency when it's bumpy, because you can make a board in flat water paddle pretty nice. So that's where we started. And then yeah, just kind of where that's kind of the focus, and then really keeping the board feeling light on your shoulders longer, through a long distance race, up those upwind grinds, um, and helping your legs get fresh. So all that kind of contributes to that. So like
Yeah.
the longer forward gliding, it's easier on your shoulders. It's going to be faster out of the hole. It's going to be nicer upwind, and so
Mm.
you wouldn't believe like the critical of like the shape of the nose and all that stuff that comes into play. And, but that was it. Like efficiency upwind, stability in rough conditions. Usually, when you could kind of conquer those things, they're going to be good in
Mm-hmm.
flat water anyway. So
Yep.
that's where we started.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been using the your Blackfish dugout for the better part of the past year now, and since moving on to this new EverReady, I've definitely have noticed and enjoyed just all the performance upgrades that you guys added to it since the Blackfish dugout board. I love how well it punches up that wind when you're paddling upwind conditions, as well as the stability of the board that provides you with that deeper dugout. I'm a taller guy, so I do really enjoy having that deeper dugout design to it. It just provides me more stability when I'm paddling on this board in like more choppy conditions. As well, though, I think just my overall like most favorite feature about this new board design, though, as I said, is that nose of the board, how well it just punches up chop when you're paddling in those windier conditions on the water.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And it's funny you talk about how you're tall because Arthur's a tall paddler too. I think you're
Mm-hmm.
taller than him though. I think he's like 6'2" ish.
Yeah, I'm
And
6'4".
yeah, Donato Friends I think is 6'4",
Yep.
and those guys, that those are things they'll comment on is like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll think a board's pretty stable, but Arthur will be like, oh, it's pretty tippy actually. You're like, really? And it's because he's 4 inches taller than me. It definitely comes
Mm-hmm.
into play. So that's good that you noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is such a completely different board. And it's like the Blackfish. I think that board's so popular is because I feel like anyone from a beginner to an expert could hop on that board
Yeah.
pretty quickly and get used to it, right? There's not
Mm-hmm.
a big learning curve on that board, which makes it so great.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I feel there's a little learning curve in there because
Mm-hmm.
the angled rails do keep the board really playful, and
Yep.
that's what better paddlers like. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a beginner paddler would probably consider that a tippy feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. It's not a tippy feeling. It's
Mm-hmm.
expected to do that. So it's more of a playful um, attack kind of feature. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And as you get better at paddling, you want your board to be a little more free. You don't want it to be so locked in. Especially like if you're going down bumps. There's always crosswinds. You don't want to be going in a straight line. You want it to kind of hydroplane and kind of fit in those bumps. And
Mm-hmm.
you want that when you're attacking and trying to chase around a draft pack. And so that's what the angled rails really do is keep the board really playful and forgiving that way.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta kind of trust it and learn that
Mm-hmm.
and to your advantage. So
Yeah.
that I would say that's the biggest difference between the two boards. If
Mm-hmm.
someone hops on one from the other, some people think that everybody's just as stable right off the bat. Some people go, oh, it's a little
Mm-hmm.
twitchy, but I see what they're saying, but that's meant to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another really big design feature of that
Yeah.
board, the playfulness of it.
Mm. No, exactly. And that kind of leads me into my next set of questions here in terms of the design of the board. And one of the things I didn't notice, as you said, when I got from or went from the Blackfish over to the EverReady, is those rounded rails and how that does kind of affect the way the board handles. Now, when I first got on the EverReady, I did feel pretty stable on this paddle board, and I think it does have to do with having a lower center of gravity with the deeper dugout design to it. But at the same time, like you're saying, those rounded rails, I do feel like that board does move more side to side, and just learning how to trust the movement of that board while paddling on the water, versus like the Blackfish with that more scored off design on the rails. You definitely get more locked into that, and you just kind of get into a rhythm and a grind. But for me, I really had to learn how to kind of adjust my style of riding to handle the board better and allow me to trust the board as well, knowing that it'll still be stable even when it's rolling more to the sides with those rounded rails. So when I first got this race board, I actually took it the very next day to a race in Canada, which probably wasn't the smartest move on my part, just jumping on a board I wasn't super familiar with for a race. And anyways, that is the one thing where I did kind of struggle with in this race, as there was quite a bit of side chop and some boat wake and stuff like that. And just having to learn to really trust the movement side to side of those rounded rails was kind of hard for me to get used to. And so since that time, and just spending more time on this paddleboard, getting used to it, and like I said, just trusting the rolling of it, as well as understanding how I can use it to my advantage to pulling into draft trains, out of draft trains, handling side chop better, is learning to ride it with more control and allow me to have more control as the board as well, to make it go where I want it to go. So it sounds like that's kind of like design feature then of why you chose to do the rounded rails, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as you start getting better at paddling and the good guys, if you watch them, they don't really move on their board that much,
Mm,
unless you're catching a big bump or whatever. They're trusting their board, they're foot steering a lot. So yeah, the board's designed to kind of lock in that spot and use
mm-hmm,
your feet, forward and back. It's almost like you're in an airplane, you're leaning this way
mm-hmm,
and that way. You're not really stepping back all that much, and you're letting the board do the work for you.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely a playful board, and that's by
Yeah.
design. And the playfulness makes it really forgiving. And I
Mm,
think there's a misconception where people are like, yeah, dugouts are cool, but side
mm-hmm.
chop just terrible. They drag me over the side, and I always like not cringe, but I'm all, you're so wrong. You're just paddling the board incorrectly, And I don't
Mm-hmm.
care if it's our board or an NSP or an All Star. I mean, they're designed. If the swell's coming this way and you're riding a dugout, it's designed to lean on the downwind rail and have the swells work under the board. You don't want it grabbing the board, and if,
Yeah.
if it's grabbing you and pushing you around, you're leaning too far into the wind and it's taking you, or you're too far up on the board. The noses, it helps actually so much more in side chop. It kind of drives me nuts a little bit. The people that don't think that, because that's
Yeah.
exactly why we made the board, was for the side chop
Mm,
and chop. You just got to learn your board a little more, and
mm-hmm.
that just comes from hours on the water, really.
Yeah.
And that's where those rails really kind of favor that too. It's just round, soft. The water doesn't grab it. It's designed to
Mm-hmm.
unload the rail and go right under it, and you're going to keep
Mm,
track. So, um,
absolutely. So on the bottom side of this board, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I've kind of noticed that you guys removed your center concave or channel on the bottom side of this race board. Now I know in your previous boards, like the Blackfish, you guys have kind of been known to have this design of having a concave or center channel on this bottom side of your board. So why did you guys decide to remove that when it comes to the EverReady?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like I'm definitely known as a designer that likes a concave in my race boards.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the first couple we actually had some with concave and some without.
Mm,
And what we started finding was, essentially, the bottom edge is pulled in a little narrower with because of the rails, how they're
yep.
shaped. And with the concave in there, it started feeling a little grippy. That's
Mm,
how I would explain it.
mm-hmm.
Where on the Blackfish, the concave's wider, and the progression of the concaves is a little different. Like where you place the
Yeah.
deepest part of the concave is always something that I try to align with where I'm trying to release the water on a board. Um, but yeah, if they get too narrow, at least in this case, it just felt a little sticky. Where a concave in general, you won't really notice it until you're like at top speed. And then once you're at top speed, it kind of keeps the glide a little longer, like especially if you're like 200-meter sprinting, for instance, like it kind of kicks in halfway up your effort level, but at the top, it'll keep you skipping easier. And then even in downwind bumps, um, once you catch the wave, you feel it just levitate a little bit more, and it'll glide more into that next bump. And it also adds an element of stability, but not as much as people think. People think you put a concave in there and it gives you this big old stability advantage, but it really doesn't. It's just more of like a keeping the board lively. And with the Blackfish, the way the concave's placed, it's really nice because it keeps the board really level when you're sprinting. If you see it compared to a lot of boards, it's not
Mm-hmm.
doing the
Yeah.
hobby horse. It kind of keeps it level, and that's all by design with the release of the Blackfish.
Mm,
But this board, since it is narrower, essentially narrower planing surface. Long story short, we put a concave in it. It felt a little sticky, so
yeah.
um, it looked really cool. I really wanted it to work, but yeah, we ended up taking it out. So the flat bottom it's really simple in a way. Um, but it's so complex on the rails, so it
Yeah.
just makes it a nice, clean, very slippery feel,
Mm-hmm.
with the edges pulled in. So that's where we kind of gained some speed in the flat water was that simpler bottom with the placing of the rails, and obviously the shape of the nose and the tail's a little narrower, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's my first personal race board design I have designed without a concave in it,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's pretty fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, and
Um,
trust me, like I said, we tried it, but it just felt better without it. Yeah, I mean, the position of the fin box is actually pretty crucial. I feel there's a lot of race boards out there where the fin box is in the release of the board.
mm,
So like the water's already releasing, and then it hits the fin, and so now it's creating more drag. Um, so I don't know how how people go about where they put a fin in, or if they think about that. I'm not sure, but I definitely use a formula, and there's definitely a width a small part of it is the width of the tail. I won't put it further back at a certain width of the tail. Um, but what I'm doing is I'm aligning the width of the tail with the curve of the rocker and where I want the water to release. And I always put my fin in front of that release point because it's not going to be behind it. So if you put it behind it, it's a big no-no. And there's a lot of boards out there like that.
mm,
So that's where I'm focused. And
mm,
the tail's narrower on this board than the blackfish. So even just by that, it's naturally going to move up exactly where I have a formula.
mhm. Yeah, that's interesting and does make a ton of sense. Another thing I noticed too since using this board is when I do something like a pivot turn, the back of this board does seem to sink in the water relatively pretty easy and makes the whole entire like pivot turning process so much easier and more enjoyable. And that's a feature that I have really enjoyed when it comes to using this board as well.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's like the narrower ones, and you have the 22 and a half, right?
Yeah, that's
The
correct.
21 and the 22 and a half, like I feel are pretty like they're pretty, I would say like an intermediate paddler or above should be on those boards because you go to the 24 and the 24 like feels really freaking stable where these are a little swirly back there. But
Hmm.
like you said, someone like yourself spends a lot of time in the water, like it's nice for you. But it's been
Hmm.
interesting to see who thinks it's not stable and not.
Mm.
But yeah, the fin, like you're saying, since it's up, you obviously it does help. You don't have to step all the way back. A lot of people feel like you have to step all the way to that kick pad, but you don't. It's actually easier if you step in front of it. So the way we have that arch bar,
Hmm.
the main reason is just a reference point. Obviously Candace feels like it gives her grip and whatever.
Hmm.
I don't feel it really does that for me, but it does give me sort of like a little braille. I don't got to
Yeah.
lift up my feet. And which I found for myself, if I'm just right at the front of that kick pad, where it's just touching my foot, and it seems like you don't even have to like lift the board that high right there. Almost like a low sweeping one. It's really nice. So yeah, that's all the stuff we think about, right? Where
Hmm.
we get that kick tail pad to give you the reference for that and
Hmm.
everything. And yeah, and I feel it kick turns pretty stable for how narrow the board is for sure.
Yeah.
So that's nice to hear that you feel the same. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed using boards that give you more of a reference, like you said, kind of that braille for your feet, whether it's in change and texture design to the deck pad or having a more of a bump towards the tail of the board. Just something where I can almost just close my eyes and simply feel with my feet and know exactly where I'm at my paddleboard at all times without having to actually look down and see with my eyes physically. So with that being said as well, the last question I have in terms of the design of the board comes to the rocker. Now, when I look at this board, I feel like the EverReady has more rocker to it. So with that, is that to help the board do better in like downwind and upwind conditions or riding in any kind of swell? Just kind of what are your thoughts and ideas of why you created this board with more rocker?
Yeah, well, it's funny if how can I explain this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really have, well, okay, so it doesn't have much rocker than the Blackfish,
Oh,
but
okay.
how it gets there is much different, right?
Mm.
So a rocker could be like a continuous bow, curve,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be flat with a little kick, you know,
Yeah.
flat and then a kick at the end. So like
Mm-hmm.
say the tail measurement just roughly is 2.5 inches exit rocker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it could get there several ways, right? So you
Yeah.
can't be like, oh, that board has 2.5 inches rocker. That's the same as this board over here that has two
Mm-hmm.
and a half inches. I mean, technically, yes, it's the same at the end, but how did it get
Yeah.
there? Um, so this one, the only way I could explain it, I would say the Blackfish has more of a continuous curve in it.
Mm-hmm.
The deepest part of the rocker, which I mean is the like the landing zone for the point where it starts coming up again, is
Mm-hmm.
different. And it's so I would say it's the landing point of the rocker where it starts doing that is forward of the
Mm-hmm.
Blackfish. So it kind of gives you this flatter zone in front of your feet.
Mm-hmm.
So what that's helping to do is when you're sprinting, it's almost like you're kind of going downhill in a way,
Yeah.
and then it's releasing behind you. A lot of times,
Mm.
rocker will be the deepest behind your stance, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of going like this in a way.
Yeah.
So it has a flatter, longer spot with the same amount of tail kick, but it got there a lot more gradual. Um,
Mm.
so actually, I think the tail has a little bit, maybe a 1/4 inch more tail rocker. Nothing crazy, but the nose is actually the same. It's just gets there later.
Mm-hmm.
Sense. So that, like there's a
Huh.
specific spot that's different than the Blackfish.
Yeah.
So it kind of keeps it's almost like two boards in a way. There's the front end is kind of lower in
Yeah.
gravity, and the back is more trying to get the water out.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, I'm not a board designer, so the explanation is super helpful to me as well. I think it's more of just like a visual thing. When you look at the Everready next to the Blackfish, it just visually looks like it has more rocker. But like you're saying, I think just the way you get
Yeah,
there is
totally.
the
And it could
visual
have that
difference.
illusion where it looks like it has more. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like a cool experiment for you. I don't know if you still have your Blackfish, but just like
Yeah.
a cool vision for you would put both on flat water,
Mm-hmm.
kind of look, and
True.
you'll see the story a little bit more. You know what I
Yeah, that
mean?
makes sense. Yeah, I probably should do that.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. But it's cool because rocker. I mean, rocker amount. Uh, is like the number one thing I worry about.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the engine of the board,
Yep.
and it's going to determine how that board performs in flat water or bumpy conditions. And
Mm-hmm.
when you think about a paddle board, I think a lot of people don't think about like when you're paddling, you're not getting energy pushed from behind like an engine. You're not even a kayaker or a sprint racer where it's just you're low and there's not a lot of up and down where it's coming from side to side, and it's not as far out,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not as front loaded. So like a stand-up paddleboard, the rocker is very unique because you're up higher, it's coming from one or the other side, it's way out in front of you, and you're pulling it back, right? So you're really
Yeah.
front loading it. So you got to imagine like different rockers are going to receive how you get that power differently.
Mm-hmm.
So this rocker might be fast like in a surf ski or something,
Yeah.
but it's not going to work for a stand-up paddleboard
Mm-hmm.
because we're so unique on how we deliver our power and energy
Mm-hmm.
from the front. There's nothing like that. So even like when guys are like, "Oh, I designed a board with this naval architect that does race boats," like that's cool. And have I sent my files to friends that I have like that just to get a reference point and see what they
Mm-hmm.
say? Totally. But there's been times where they're like, "Oh man, this is going to be so draggy and da 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 from their
Mm-hmm.
expertise." But you're like, "No,
Mm-hmm.
you don't get it. The power's coming out here.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't work. It doesn't
Yeah.
work." Um, anyway, it's
No,
just
yeah,
stuff
exactly.
I think about when I'm
Yeah.
building the board.
That makes, yeah, I like that. So with that being said, you guys obviously still have your flat deck version of Blackfish in your line of race boards. And we kind of talked about the difference in rockers and stuff. So when would there be a time when you would choose to use the flat deck Blackfish over this new EverReady race board?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the two boards now makes it a little more clear for people as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and both boards you can use in every condition. You really can. We've had some guys riding the EVERREADY in surf races already and stuff and doing good. But yeah, truly the Blackfish flat deck. Um, I would say the one big advantage it has is going in and out of the surf. So it doesn't have to be a technical race. It could be a distance race that you have to navigate through surf at the start. Because we all know the race is won and lost mostly at the start.
Yep.
And then also at the ending, you fall on your wave and people surf right by you. You're pretty bummed after paddling 8 miles. So that's where the huge advantage is because there's no water coming in the deck and slowing you down.
Yeah.
Um, and then the EVERREADY, just with the advantage of the dugout on in choppier oceans, that's the big advantage over the Blackfish. Although someone like Candace Appleby, who loves a flat deck, she rides it in everything. So
Mm-hmm.
but there's a little crossover there for sure. They're both all water boards, but we wanted to make it very specific, like someone who's maybe intimidated by a dugout,
Mm-hmm.
paddles in the ocean a lot that has to go through waves, does a lot of tech course racing. Flat deck's a little nicer, a little easier to
Yeah.
navigate walking up and down the board.
Yeah.
They both sprint really nice. We've had them both in 200-meter sprints with
Mm-hmm.
great success. They both downwind. I would say that EVERREADY downwind's a little bit better because the dugout and the volume and the way it's just,
Mm-hmm.
tuned that way. Um, so yeah, mainly if you don't want water coming in the deck and or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's funny now, but so like ICF, for instance, I asked some of the team riders what boards they want, and they're all asking for one of each. So we'll see what happens. But I think you could, if you really wanted to, you could get away with both of them to paddle anything. And of
Yeah.
course, if money's not an object or space or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, it's nice to have them both because between the two boards, there's nothing you can't paddle.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I typically choose to stick more with just one board so I can learn how to ride it just really well. And I feel like this is something you're starting to see more often in the elite races as well. I feel like a lot of pros are using more of the all-around paddle board as their kind of go-to board for the races. You don't really see as many like flat water sprint boards nowadays in the racing scene. There's definitely still there, but I still feel like the majority of racers now are choosing just to use their all-around board and all the races, whether it's a flat water sprint race or a longer all-water race. So that's something that's been interesting kind of to see in the racing scene.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I feel an all around board just for racing is, they're quicker to attack, like a flat
Mm-hmm.
water board tends to stay in the water and doesn't really jump out as much. It's almost like if you paddle slower, they go faster. They're more efficient. Where an all water board, you put all your effort in, it doesn't really have a governor on it. You know what I mean? They don't go as
Mm-hmm.
fast as you're going to give it. So yeah, it's always interesting to see what guys choose and all that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, I definitely recommend people who don't do a ton of racing or a ton of paddling on the water, but still want a race board, that they just kind of get one race board and stick with that to learn how to ride it really well, kind of in all conditions on the water. But at the same time, it's cool now that you guys have more like clear lines with your race boards with having the flat deck Blackfish as well as the dugout ever ready designed for different conditions on the water for people to choose from, or maybe to get both of them for those who do a lot of paddling on the water or who do a lot of racing who want a board for certain conditions to use on the water. So it's really cool to see that you guys have more of those clear, more defined lines now of which boards use for which conditions on the water.
Yeah, and we're actually launching a new flat deck Blackfish
Mm.
for next year, which will
Hmm.
come kind of doing a soft launch at the end of this year. So there'll be a whole new flat deck um, coming soon.
Awesome. Are you guys still going to call that board a Blackfish, or are you guys going to change the name up on that one also?
Yeah, we just called it Blackfish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be just like that, and we're kind of having fun with like doing the ghost white colorway. It's
Yeah.
kind of just kind of low key and kind of stealth, and so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just be another version of the ghost white Blackfish. But I'm pretty excited about it. Like a couple guys, like Campbell Carter's been just raced over the weekend
Uh-huh.
in race here down in Oceanside, and yeah, a couple of them had it out in Europe in a couple races. So pretty excited for that board as well.
Yeah, I'm stoked about that. So kind of summarize up then this talk of the EverReady race board. and kind of all the design features behind it. If you had to choose like one feature aspect that you enjoy the most about this new EverReady race board, what would that be?
Yeah, it's hard because all of it's kind of new, you know. It's
Yeah.
all new stuff for us. But I would say just I mean the bottom shape of it. I just, you know, it took a lot of time and a lot of thought and
Mm,
everything like that. And so I'm pretty proud about where it started and where it ended up, and just how it feels how we wanted it to. You know, it just feels really alive, and you know, it feels quick off the line. It feels soft on your shoulders, and it's just quick. You know, I'm always amazed, even just myself. Like I paddled last night with my little group, and you know, we're just paddling flat water. I'm like, man, I'm getting some really good numbers with this board right now. You know, so it just feels good. Like you know, 70-80%, like your kind of typical paddle speed. I'm getting like I'm not super trained up right now, and I'm getting
mm.
really close to like my fully trained numbers on it. You
Man,
know,
that's
and
awesome.
that's pretty nice to
Yeah.
so, and it's cool too. So like someone like Donato, who really
Hmm.
who's really dialed in with his training, he sends you screenshots of his Garmin or
Yeah.
what it is, you know, because if he's sending me screenshots of his times and his speeds, like he's kind of like, dude, check out this
Yep.
board. So he's been doing that lately, and I'm like, oh wow, bro, let me convert this from kilometers to miles per
Yeah.
hour, and I'm all because if you're going as fast as I think you are, I'm all, dude, that's impressive. So it's been cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I've enjoyed watching him. Such a talented paddler, obviously doing super well this year in terms of the racing scene. It's incredible too because he's a big dude. Like he's like I think close to my height, but like twice my width. So a big dude, doing some big things in the racing scene right now.
I always tell him, I'm all, bro, I love watching you race because he races differently. You know, he's always
Mm-hmm.
attacking. He likes to be at the front. Um, you know, it's always putting pressure on you. You know, he's
Mm-hmm.
not one to just sit back there and kind of be like that. He's attacking and he's putting pressure on. I love it. He's a beast.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been meaning to tell him as well on social media that I've been loving all of his race photos recently because I feel like in all of his photos, he just has like this super angry look on his face as he's paddling on the water, like he's out there to kill somebody or something.
Yeah, he's pretty. Yeah, I mean, he's intense when he races, man, and it shows. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
he's fun to watch.
Yeah, he's an awesome athlete. So, kind of to wrap up today's episode, I'd love to ask you just a kind of a few more personal questions as well to hear more of your story and your background, especially when it comes to more of your shaping background. And so, my question for you is like, what do you enjoy the most when it comes to designing slash shaping your own boards?
Um, yeah, like since I've always had kind of like a creative kind of design kind of way of thinking ever since I was a kid, like even long before like I ever shaped a board or whatever, like, you know, I just couldn't get it the way I wanted it to. Not that people can't shape better than me or whatever, but I'm just saying like in my head, I'm trying to get something or I want to try something. So I always just like, all right, I'm just going to do it myself. And I just love like having a concept and the freedom to kind of go after it and do it right. And not everything
Mm-hmm.
works, but I just love the freedom of it. You know, just I could
Yeah.
do whatever I want anytime, and that's I mean it's super fun to just
Mm-hmm.
do whatever you want, and that's maybe also one of the bad things is like every time I make myself a new board, it's different. I go, oh, this board's magic, but I got to change the next one. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just fun to be able to just have it at my like my canvas or whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
say. I could I could take it anywhere I want anytime, and I write all types of boards. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just I mean imagine it's just endless in every direction I could go. So it's fun. I literally wake up thinking about this crap and I go to
Mm-hmm.
sleep about this crap.
Yeah.
Literally live it, breathe it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's fun stuff for me.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's awesome how you're able to like just think of something in your head and then literally go out the next day and create it into like a physical product. Because so many people like we have these dreams, but we can't just like go out and make those dreams a reality like the next day. So it's really cool how you're able to do that from your designing background and create your dreams into realities, especially that
No,
you
and
have.
you know what? I had a huge jump start. You know, my dad's a legendary shaper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've been making surfboards since 1960, and we've been making paddle boards early 2000s, dude. Like 2004, I think my dad made the first race board. So I had a very jumpstart baseline. I didn't have to guess on a rocker or anything like that. You know, my very first boards were a board my dad made that I started tweaking. And so yeah, definitely had a big jump start with that. It's super fortunate to, like, if I'm stuck, hey dad, can you come over here and fix this?
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so it's cool.
So wrapping things up here, my last question for you today has to deal more with like the beginner racer paddler. Now, obviously, the racing scene is continuing to grow in the United States as well as across the world. There's a lot of people coming from paddling on, like, say, like an all-around paddleboard who get into the racing scene with little experience. So, from someone like you who has quite a bit of experience in the paddling world and the racing scene, what's a piece of advice you give to someone who's just getting into stand-up paddleboard racing for the first time?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake I see was someone who's just started racing, and they want to, like, skip a few steps and get fast. They get a board that's too narrow. So 100% get a board you're stable on. You're going to be faster. You're going to be faster. Even the pros, you're faster as long as you're stable. And I see a lot of guys, they'll do a couple races and everyone's beating them or whatever, and they feel they should be beating this person when they don't really think that's maybe their technique yet, or just more practice. They think they got to get a narrower board, and they get a narrower board, and then their efficiency and skills as a paddler take the hit. They don't get any better, for a long time. So I would say get a stable board. Don't worry about it. And honestly, like we're saying, get an all-around race board. If you want to get a race board, get an all-around race board. You could paddle it in anything. And yeah, and if you're into it, commit to a nice board. It doesn't do you any good to get a cheap kind of crappy board and then you find out you're into it and you gotta spend more money on another one. Like, just get a nice board from the get-go, and you'll have it for a long time. And yeah, stable is fast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. That's like the biggest piece of advice I also give to people is get on a board that you're going to be stable on. Because when you're on a board that you're stable on, you can actually focus on working on technique. If you're on a board you're not stable on, all you're trying to focus on is simply not falling off the stupid board. So it's really important to, like you said, to have that board you're stable on to actually focus on technique, actually applying power and momentum in your stroke versus, like I said, to try not to fall off your paddle board.
I always give Candace Appleby as a perfect example, because obviously she's like the undisputed goat of women's paddling, and she rides the widest boards out of all the top women, and she still smokes them all. So right there proves it alone that stability is fast, and being comfortable and being confident in every single stroke. Just take it from Candace, the best there ever was.
Yeah. Well, Dave, thanks so much once again for coming on today's podcast episode. I know I learned a lot from our conversation today, and I really am stoked about this new EVERREADY race board. So if you are listening to today's episode and you want to learn more about this new EVERREADY race board, I highly encourage you to check out Dave's website at infinitysurf.com. We learn more about it. Maybe buy yourself one of these boards and have some fun time on the water with us all. That's it for today's episode, though. And Dave, thank you so much once again. I'll catch the rest of you in the next one.